International Soccer Preview. We are Soccerphiles Canada. Welcome to the short version of Series 19, looking at the groups and teams of the 2023 Asian Cup, played in Qatar in January 2024. This episode is looking at Group B, Japan, Iraq, Vietnam, and Indonesia. Here we go. It's the International Soccer Preview. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Kiera.
And in the short version here, we're replacing parts 1 and 2 of the full-length version with a short summary of each team's history and a look at their recent form.
In the full-length version, Connor and Kevin introduce the teams in part 1 with some information about each country, their location, population, and so on. Part 2 is a history of each team with a deep dive into Asian Cup finals history. They then look into performances in recent tournaments and end with an overview of the players.
Yeah, so in this media cast, in the short version, we're going to tag on part 3 from the full-length version, which is Connor and my discussion of the prospects for each team.
So if this short version grabs your interest, keep an eye out for those full-length versions and player versions, which will come later in 2023.
Stay tuned at the end for more information on accessing those and other media cast series that we've done.
Okay, let's jump into the 4 teams of Group D of the Asian Cup finals. These teams are Japan, Iraq, Vietnam, and Indonesia.
All right, so let's begin with Japan and a summary of their history. So after being a non-entity for most of the last century, Japan stormed onto the Asian Cup scene in 1992 and the World Cup stage in 2002. They have since proven the strongest team in Asia, at least in terms of Asian Cup play, with 4 titles over the last 8 editions of the tournament. This rankles their great rivals, South Korea, who have not won an Asian Cup since 1960, but who still dominate the local level. That's the East Asian Football Federation Cup, a tournament that's taken very seriously in East Asia. The jury is still out on who, between the great rivals, has impressed most on the world stage, both consistently reaching the cup and now regularly passing the group stage. As strong as Japan is, they are not only troubled by first-tier teams like South Korea, who sometimes get the better of them, but by second-tier teams at the campaign level and even third-tier teams at the game level. UAE knocked them out of the quarterfinals of the 2015 Asian Cup and actually has an even head-to-head record with Japan, and Qatar has also troubled them. And they have also dropped points to Singapore and Vietnam in recent years.
In looking at their recent performance, Japan opened their 2018 World Cup qualifying with a tie at home to lowly Singapore. In the following round, it was a home loss to UAE, and they ended their 2022 qualification with a tie in Vietnam that cost them first place. An opening home loss to Oman contributing to that, although there was no cost beyond a blow to their pride. Lapses like that are the only chink in their armor, and it is interesting that they have gone out of the last 2 Asian Cups, not at the hands of top-tier teams like South Korea, Australia, Iran, or Saudi Arabia, but 2 second-tier teams like UAE and Qatar. That seems to be the result of overconfidence, even if it has been fairly earned by passing the group stage of the last 2 World Cups.
All right, so that is Japan, and we move on to our second team in the group, Iraq, beginning with a summary of their history. So Iraq is a second-tier team in Asia. Their Asian Cup record suggests first tier by dint of their winning the title in 2007, as well as passing the group stage in every edition since 1996. However, their World Cup record sees them reaching the final round only about half the time and finishing in the bottom half of the table once there. That has improved recently, though, reaching the final round the last 3 times and improving slightly every time. Iraq wins the odd game over top-tier teams, but are a cup below them and more the strength of strong second-tier teams like UAE and Qatar. They are fairly consistent against third-tier teams like Vietnam and Singapore.
Looking at their recent performance, being knocked out in the round of 16 of the Asian Cup in 2019 was disappointing after finishing fourth in 2015. It ultimately came as a result of not winning their group stage, which they have done only once in their Asian Cup history. That history was generally stronger than their World Cup record, but reaching the final round in the last 3 editions is making up for that. Though they still finish in the bottom half of those final round groups, there is slight improvement, finishing last of 5 in 2014, 5th of 6th, with doubled the points in 2018, and 4th of 6 in 2022, though with fewer points.
All right, so that is Iraq, and we move on to Vietnam, starting with a summary of their history. So Vietnam has a long history in Asia, even if they were absent for long periods, more after the Vietnam War than during. But their participation has been consistent since the 1990s. Early successes are a bit deceiving. 4th place finishes in the first 2 cups, but actually only earning a single draw across both of those tournaments. They were very weak, capable of beating only 4th tier teams in the region, until signs of improvement began in the lead up to the 2007 Asian Cup. As one of 4 hosts for that cup and doing well in it, they reached the quarterfinals. That gave them a boost, and they became more competitive, at least at the individual game level. At the campaign level, a further boost was needed.
Yeah, that boost that you mentioned began with winning the 2018 AFF Cup. And do you want to talk briefly about that, what the AFF is?
Oh, yeah, sorry. That is I was just taking a drink of water while you were talking. You took me by surprise.
Sorry, that's why
Yeah.
I was over to you.
That's okay. It's actually an acronym within an acronym. So the first A stands for ASEAN, ASEAN, and that is the Association of Southeast Football Federation. Anyway, it's a collection of Southeast nations stretching from, I would say, Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia, that group.
Thanks. Yeah, so Vietnam did win the 2018 AFF Cup. That was their second title in that local region. Vietnam looked stronger in qualifying for the 2019 Asian Cup, and we're excited about a promising young generation going into the tournament. They performed well, beating Jordan in the round of 16 and proving competitive against top-tier teams, even in the games they lost. That generation brought them to the final round of 2022 World Cup qualifying for the first time. Though they were out of depth once they got there, they did beat China and in the last game draw in Japan to stop them from finishing first in the group.
Yes, they prevented Japan from topping the group there. And I'm really looking forward to seeing Vietnam in this cup, because they were a very young team, like I'm talking 18 and 19 years old in the 2019 Cup. So now they're 23, around 23. So they'll be kind of a bit more mature and stuff. Anyway, I'm getting off topic here. Let's move on to our 4th team, Indonesia. And in terms of their history, Indonesia has consistently been a 3rd-tier team throughout most of their long history. In World Cup play, they are competitive with 3rd-place teams in the semi-final round and sometimes take points off 2nd or even top-tier teams. However, it's never enough to get them to the final round. Though those results should mean that they don't reach the Asian Cup, the fact of earning points at the game level has sometimes seen them through to the Asian Cup tournament. After coming agonizingly close in 1984 and 1992, they finally reached the tournament in 1996 and maintained that for 4 tournaments in a row. In a quirky pattern, they took points in the first game and then lost the following 2 every time, but only once finished outside of last place in the group stage. In their local cup, which is taken quite seriously, they have finished 2nd in 6 of the 14 editions, but they have never won in the final to earn a title.
Looking at their recent performance, recent World Cups have been uncharacteristically poor. In 2014, they lost all games in the semifinal round, and in 2018 were disqualified. 2022 gave them a good opportunity to return to being somewhat competitive. 4 of the 5 teams in the round from their own Southeast Asian locality, but they managed only a single draw with Thailand over the 8 games. Against those same teams, they had earned a second place finish in their local AFF Cup in 2020. And 2023 showed a return to form as they beat Kuwait to qualify for the Asian Cup once more.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the short version section where we look at a summary of their history and recent form.
And now we are going to move into part 3 from the full-length discussion, where Connor and Kevin will discuss the prospects of these teams.
This is the discussion and prospects section. We welcome people from the short version of the podcast to this, and Japan, Iraq, Vietnam, and Indonesia. Let me ask you, do you see Japan as assailable in any way here?
Not really, to be honest. I mean, I think if they show the form that they've shown in, World Cup qualifying, the World Cup, some friendlies since, I think Japan really seems to be in a good period. They've got top players playing in top leagues, and I think they really should win this group easily. A point dropped is possible, but I probably favor Japan to go 3-0 more likely.
Yeah, we did see a bit of a lapse there in World Cup qualifying in that final game where Vietnam took them for a point. But yeah, at the most, I would say, one tie maybe, but it's hard to see them not finishing on top of this group.
Yeah, and it could also possibly come in a game where they've already qualified. If, say, for example, they win their first 2, and then you might see a lapse of the same sort we saw in World Cup qualifying, where it was really a meaningless game for them.
Yeah, it was weird that they did that in the second game against Costa Rica. Kind of fielded a weaker or an experimental team. I don't know what was going on there. So yeah, they might do something like that here and give someone an in, but inconceivable that they wouldn't finish first or second and advance from the group stage. How about Iraq?
Yeah, I mean, I think Iraq, we saw that they're kind of a second tier team. They were top of pot 2, so and kind of taking the longer view, they typically get out of the group stage. We've seen that kind of throughout their history. They've really pretty consistently managed to do that. They don't always go much further, but I think that there's competition from Vietnam. But so second place, I think, is up for grabs. But overall, I would say they would be the favorites to advance in second place.
Yeah, I mean, we did see them lapse a little bit in the Arab Cup. Otherwise, they've been pretty consistent recently, like a fairly strong second-tier team. So not much of a threat from Vietnam or Indonesia. But I do think maybe the biggest possibility of things diverting from expectations would be maybe Vietnam taking points off Iraq, perhaps even winning. What do you think there?
Yeah, I think like with Japan and Iraq, you kind of tend to know what you get. Like Japan tends to win the groups. Iraq often finishes second in a group. This Vietnam team kind of exceeded expectation the last Asian Cup. They got to the final round of World Cup qualifying, and they have a very good young core that's now kind of maturing. So to me, they're a bit harder to place. I think it's very possible that they could have a surprisingly good performance or kind of upset the odds. To me, they're kind of the team that could be perhaps the most variable out of all these teams in the group.
Yeah, I'm of kind of two minds about Vietnam. I really want them to do well, and I hope they do. This young generation is very exciting, and they have, they did take points off UAE and Japan in that final round of qualifying, but it was a bit weaker than I hoped for. I thought they could finish out of bottom in that final round of World Cup qualifying, but they were a bit disappointing there. Not that great in the group stage of the 2019 Asian Cup. They just passed in third place there, but then they were pretty impressive in the quarterfinal against Jordan, and even just 1-0 to Japan. In the round of 16 against Jordan, 1-0 to Japan in the quarterfinal. So they have taken some points off of second-tier teams of the level of Iraq, but I'd almost kind of put it as below 50-50 that they'll do so here. But honestly, you know, if they can get a point off Iraq or off of Japan, you know, who are lapsing, that could give them 4 points to get through to the round of 16, where you know, they may be able to do well.
Yeah, and I think third place, they could even go through with one victory. There's going to be some teams that do that. I mean, 4 points would guarantee it, but 3 points could put them through as well, depending on how goal difference and that kind of things works.
Yeah.
And I think comparing Vietnam and Iraq, I mean, both teams were in the final round of World Cup qualification. Vietnam finished last out of 6. Iraq finished 4th out of 6. So it kind of shows their relative strength against kind of second and first tier teams in the region.
Yeah, there is you mean second and, did you say second and third?
Sorry, second and first. Just with the in the final round of World Cup
qualification. I see what you mean.
That's who they're
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, like, Vietnam haven't really shown it that much. They definitely look stronger against third tier teams, like in their local region, but need to be showing it a bit more. But I'm kind of hoping they can get something out of Iraq here, just because I'm excited about that young generation.
So you mentioned their young generation, and they're you know, perhaps a bit lucky to get through to the quarterfinals in the last Asian Cup. Do you think that was an anomaly, or do you think it is the start of something more positive for Vietnam?
No, I think it could be a positive. As we said in the longer podcast, like the average age of that team was 21.1 years old.
That's right,
Jordan. Yeah. And now that group is 25 years old, so a bit more experience under their belt. So, as I said, I was hoping to see a little bit more in the final round of World Cup qualifying, but I do think it's possible for them to maybe challenge Iraq and second-tier teams. I don't consider that lucky. I consider it that they are an improved team that haven't really shown it as much as they might have so far.
All right.
Indonesia's a third-tier team too. They do seem a bit below Vietnam. Do you think they have a chance here?
I don't give them much of a chance. They came in as a, you know, the lowest ranked team in the tournament, but also they were quite abysmal in qualifying. You know, I think only 6 teams needed to go through like an extra playoff before the final round, and they were one of them, having picked up just 1 point from 8 matches. So I don't see them taking many points from this group. And in fact, even though Vietnam may be a bit unlucky to be placed with strong teams like Japan and Iraq, being placed with Indonesia, I think gives them a real chance at going through in third place. If they can, that's a game they should win. I think they will win it, and they may even be able to change goal difference in their favor.
Yeah, because they could lose some goals to Japan for sure. I mean, I agree with you completely. Like, Indonesia haven't really challenged a second-tier team like Vietnam has, which gives them some hope. They did beat Kuwait in that final round of Asian Cup qualifying for this tournament. But Kuwait has been in poor form lately, and the other team they beat is Nepal, which is more of a fourth-tier team. So they haven't really shown anything. Still recovering, maybe getting a bit better since their ban, but as we said, they weren't really a top team before that anyway. So they'd really have to show something that they haven't shown before to get any points out of this, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if you take away that 7-0 hammering of Nepal, Indonesia are basically in the Asian Cup on the strength of 1 victory. and that was victory over Kuwait. So the expanded tournament helps, but I don't think it's really indicative of their strength.
Yeah. Okay, well, I always end by trying to pin you down, the elusive Connor, to definitely putting on the line how the group is going to end. So here it is. I'm sticking it to you.
All right. Well, I'm going to stick with the pot order here. I'm going to go Japan, Iraq, Vietnam, and Indonesia. But I do think Vietnam will qualify as one of the best third place, or one of the four best third place teams.
Yeah, I'm afraid I have to agree with you there. I'm kind of hoping that Vietnam can challenge and finish second. Again, nothing against Iraq there. I'm just excited about Vietnam's younger generation. They're a little bit like Japan, very speedy and fun to watch, but of course not as strong as Japan. So I think there's an outside chance of them overcoming Iraq for second place. But if I'm pinned down, I'd still put Iraq in second and Vietnam in third. And Indonesia would be lucky to get any points out of this, just as Japan would be. It would be something of a lapse for them to drop any points in this group.
Yeah. Well, we find ourselves reluctantly agreeing with each other.
Yeah. I wish there was a bit more to argue about in this group, but it does seem fairly clearly laid out by pot order.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the look at Group D, and we will see you in our next podcast on Group D.
That's right. We will see you there.
We originally planned to tag on our past, present, and future plans for the media cast, but we have instead decided to put a link to that 10-minute video in the show notes. It covers what we're working on and what we plan to do over the next 9 months. We'd like to thank Naver Abidchan and Pixabay for the wonderful music you hear in this media cast. The title is called Arabic Trap.